She slid the red folder across the table like it was just another bill. Name's Gideon, 62, retired mechanic, currently unwanted father. The LED light above hummed too loud as I reached for my old fountain pen, the one Emily gave me when we still mattered. Ever had your legacy reassigned without asking? You don't really matter anymore, Dad, Clarabelle said, sliding the folder across the table like it was a salt shaker. I didn't flinch, just blinked once and picked up my glass of water, pretending to examine the condensation line on the outside. I'd seen deals close with less finesse in audit boardrooms, but hearing it from your only daughter with your son-in-law chewing chicken like a monk at a monastery, it hits different. The kitchen light buzzed faintly above us, an LED strip, trying too hard to be warm. Clarabelle's taste had always run clean, almost surgical. White quartz countertops, chrome handles, a framed quote near the fridge that read, "Success is intentional," like she needed to convince her backsplash to hustle. Dinner had started civil enough. She plated the roast pork like a chef, sprinkled some rosemary, offered me water with lemon. But that folder it sat beside her fork. All through the meal, a quiet storm. I knew what was coming, I just didn't expect the execution to be that clinical. Brent kept his head down. A mouthful of mashed potatoes required more attention than his father-in-law, apparently. His silence was its own kind of endorsement. It's not personal. Dad, Clarabelle continued, her voice, business soft. It's just, we need to update the estate documents. Things have changed. I looked at her, and for a moment, just a flicker, I thought about the day she came home from college with that tattoo behind her ear. Emily had noticed first. A lotus, she'd whispered with a smile. She still believes in blooming. We'd laughed. We'd believed too. But now my daughter handed me legal forms like Tupperware lids and said I didn't matter. I cleared the plates, quietly, stack by stack. Clarabelle didn't protest, and Brent finally stood to help, then sat again without touching a dish. That told me all I needed to know. I said nothing. Walked down the hallway to the guest room, formerly her nursery, now a gallery of beige neutrals and unslept sheets, and closed the door behind me. From the inside pocket of my cardigan, I drew out the letter. The paper had softened over the years, but held its shape tri-folded a crease like a spine. Emily's script danced across the page, a kind of breath I hadn't heard in over a decade. Don't let them erase you, not even gently. She'd written it in 2009, 2 years before the cancer came, back when we still believed we could reason with time. I remembered the way she'd handed it to me after Clarabelle's engagement party, her eyes scanning the living room, filled with well-meaning people and barely meaning vows. I sat on the edge of the guest bed, the letter open on my lap like scripture. The hum of the fridge in the next room became a kind of prayer. What does it mean to be erased, not hated, not discarded, just filed away? I folded the letter back into thirds tight and sharp, as if sealing a future I hadn't yet chosen. That night I couldn't remember which drawer held my socks. The house kept rearranging itself without me. I opened one drawer, hair ties, lavender sachets, a charger cable for a phone I didn't own. Another, spare bedsheets folded so tight they felt military-issued. Finally, a third drawer, shallow and half-stuck, gave way to a single pair of my socks rolled into a sad little spiral like an apology. The guest room wasn't hostile, just indifferent. A perfectly neutral cell. The window framed a blooming dogwood tree, its petals glowing like paper lanterns in the Iowa sun. But it didn't smell like home. It didn't sound like memory. Even the light switches clicked wrong. In the corner sat the old filing cabinet I'd insisted on bringing from my old house, 3 drawers of metal rebellion. Clarabelle had looked at it like it was a biohazard, but she'd said nothing when Brent and I rolled it in. I waited until the house stirred a shower, turning off Clarabelle's heels, tapping across tile. Brent's grunted yep into a phone. Then I opened the bottom drawer. Bills. Some clipped, some loose. One envelope, half crushed under a shampoo ad, caught my eye. Wells Ridge Home Equity Services. The date, January 2021. The name G.W. Leclerc. I stared at it. I hadn't initiated anything since 2019, and certainly not with Wells Ridge. The balance column had a faint smudge like someone had traced it with a damp thumb. My name was there, but the feeling wasn't. I folded the paper quietly, slipped it into a book of crossword puzzles, and slid the drawer shut. By the time I entered the kitchen, Brent was buttering toast like a man trying not to think too hard. "Morning," he said. "Sleep okay?" I shrugged. "Rooms with no names take getting used to." He chuckled too quick. "You're still the same old G-man, huh?" He sipped his coffee, eyes flicking once to the hallway behind me. "Clarabelle's got a lot on her plate lately. Just, organizing things. Organizing what." Brent looked down at his mug. "You know how she is." I nodded. I did. Clarabelle had always been a planner, but planners don't move chess pieces for nothing. They calculate. She entered a few minutes later, hair twisted into a bun so neat it looked drawn on. Her phone was already at her ear, her fingers flicking across a tablet screen. She ended the call with a crisp, "Then reschedule." "Dad," she said without looking up, "we've started streamlining the estate. There's a lot to process, and it's better if it's done now." While I'm still breathing, she paused. Just for a moment, then gave a tight smile. "That's not what I said." "No," I said, "but it's what you meant." Brent cleared his throat. "Clarabelle's just making sure everything's clean, for the future." Clarabelle crossed her arms. "You should be grateful we're still making space for you," the way she said it. Like I was a stack of boxes in a hallway. I didn't reply. I left the room not because I was angry, though I was, but because I was afraid I'd show her just how much I'd expected this moment to come. Back in the guest room, I placed the letter from Emily beneath the desk lamp. The bulb had been on too long and the heat wavered the ink. For a second, the words blurred, "Don't let them erase you." But I already felt like a pencil mark on glossy paper. I leaned back in the chair, the filing cabinet behind me like a sleeping dog. Quiet, loyal, maybe dangerous. I didn't mean to find Harold. I just needed my souls repaired, but he repaired something else instead. The bell above the shop door gave a half-hearted jingle, like even it had been through better years. The air inside was thick with leather oil and quiet jazz bleeding from an old speaker near the ceiling. The floor creaked beneath me like it remembered my weight. Still walking the same way Harold said from behind the bench without looking up. "Heel first." Always said that meant you trusted the ground too much. I chuckled. Guess I haven't learned. He finally looked up, glasses sliding low on his nose. "You still got that old house on Cedar Ridge. You know it's worth more than their shiny fridge." He wiped his hands on a threadbare towel. Soles I held up, the worn pair stitching undone at the sides, left heel nearly gone. He took them like a priest takes an offering. 3 days, he said, then paused, eyes narrowing. "What's that peeking out of your coat, Gideon?" I glanced down. Emily's letter had shifted halfway out of my inner pocket. Its folded edge yellowed like a leaf in fall. I made a move to tuck it back, but Harold stopped me. "That her handwriting?" he asked, voice soft. I nodded. From years ago, he didn't speak for a moment. Just took a sip from the chipped mug on his bench, then motioned me toward the back. "Sit. I'm not charging for wisdom, just souls." The back of the shop was narrower than I remembered, stacked shoeboxes, worn tools. A faded photo of Harold's late wife taped to a cabinet. He sat across from me at a wobbly table covered in a vinyl cloth patterned with sunflowers long since faded. "You all set legally?" he asked without ceremony. I raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean, Will?" "Deeds. Financial power of attorney, that kind of set." I hesitated. "I still have the original documents. Nothing's changed." He set down his mug with a soft thud. "And she's trying to streamline your estate," her words, I confirmed. Harold leaned back, one hand running across his bald crown. "Son, unless you've signed something new, and I mean in front of a notary, with your hand steady, they've got no legal ground to move dirt, let alone assets." I exhaled a sound more tired than relieved. "There's talk about loans, about leveraging the house." Harold's eyes sharpened behind his glasses. "They can't borrow against a property unless your name's on the approval. They'd need forged consent. You still have the will." "In a folder," I said. "Original copy. Signed by Emily and me back in 2007. Harold whistled low. "Then you're their biggest obstacle, and they're trying to make you step aside willingly." I looked down at the coffee ring on the yellowing paper mat, and for a moment all I could see was the ink blurring again under a desk lamp. "You mind if I take a look at the letter?" Harold asked gently. I slid it across the table. He handled it like a relic, fingers rough but reverent. "She always wrote pretty, like every word had to earn its keep." He read quietly for a few seconds, then set it down. This is a reminder. Not just for you, for anyone who tries to trim you out of your own story. I folded the letter again tighter this time. My hand shook a little. They talk about space like I'm an inconvenience. Harold smiled, sad and knowing. They can't erase you on paper unless you let them. We sat in silence as the jazz hummed something slow and a little off-key. For the first time in weeks, I felt the floor beneath me stop shifting. I stood pressing both palms against my knees before straightening. Thanks, Harold. He nodded. Anytime, Gideon. This bench has heard worse. As I stepped out into the street, the sun cut across the sidewalk like it meant to draw a line. A breeze carried the scent of rain still lingering from last night. I turned east towards the guest room that no longer had a name and said aloud to no one, I think I'm ready to start packing. The folder was red, not maroon, not burgundy. Corporate red, urgent and cold. It sat on the table like a wound. No placemats today, no butter dish, no salt shaker. Just the folder and 3 mugs. Mine was empty. Brent's still steaming, Clarabelle's untouched. Clarabelle smiled as she set it down. It's just refinancing forms, routine stuff. She said it the way dentists say, just a little pressure before drilling. I stared at the folder but didn't reach for it. Outside, the lawn was humming under the mower Brent had pushed around that morning. Inside, the air conditioning kicked on and filled the silence with its hollow breath. Clarabelle continued sliding the folder closer. The idea is to consolidate, streamline, make things easier on everyone in the long run. Brent coughed. Not words, just noise. He didn't look up from his plate, poking at the roast beef she'd reheated, now gray around the edges. Dad, she said, you've worked hard your whole life. This is just helping us plan better. You always said planning was half the work. I finally opened the folder. The top page was clean, signature line at the bottom, name typed neatly in Helvetica. But as I flipped through, something tightened behind my ribs. Page 3, Wells Ridge Equity Request. My name, my signature. Except it wasn't mine. It was a decent copy. The G curled wrong, the tail of the D slanted too far right. But it sat there bold and black, staring back like a stranger wearing my coat. I didn't react. I closed the folder slowly and slid it back across the table. Clarabelle blinked. What's wrong? I didn't answer. I wiped a few crumbs from the edge of the table with my sleeve and stood. Brent shifted in his seat but still didn't look up. He picked at a lukewarm carrot like it might give him something to say. You're dragging us down with your nostalgia, Clarabelle snapped. Do you even hear yourself lately? Living in the past, clinging to paper like it means something? I nodded slowly. Paper used to mean something. She opened her mouth, closed it, then looked away. The red folder stayed where it was, pulsing like a warning light. I walked to the hallway, the click of my shoes on tile, steadier than my breath. I passed the coat rack, Clarabelle's blazer, Brent's ball cap, my cardigan still holding Emily's letter like a secret under its lining. That night, I didn't speak to either of them. At dinner, I took my plate into the guest room and ate in silence while the news mumbled from the living room. Clarabelle laughed once at something on TV. It sounded rehearsed. When the house settled into hush, I opened the old suitcase at the foot of the bed. Inside, between sweaters and a bottle of antacids, I laid a brown leather folder. Into it, I slipped 3 things. Emily's letter, creased, now edges frayed like it had been passed through time itself. The original deed to the Cedar Ridge house, faint ink. Notarized, a quiet act of permanence. And a photograph, Emily in the garden laughing, holding up a tomato like it was treasure. I zipped the folder and placed it at the bottom of the suitcase. Then I turned off the lamp. I didn't slam the door when I left. I didn't even close it all the way. The house, that white modern cube Clarabelle insisted on calling efficient, seemed to sigh as I stepped out into the pre-dawn hush. The air was thick with dew and silence, and even the birds weren't ready to argue with the world yet. I walked slow, one bag slung over my shoulder, one folder pressed flat against my chest. Inside, Emily's letter, the deed to the Cedar Ridge home, a photo where she held a tomato like a ruby. And in my pocket, the pen she gave me the day we signed the loan papers for that house. A slender black fountain pen with a fine gold nib that always scratched just enough to remind you this word is real. Clarabelle and Brent were asleep. Or pretending to be. I didn't leave a note. By 5:02, I was checking into the Oakview Motel across from a Casey's. The woman behind the counter didn't ask why a man my age looked like he hadn't slept in 3 days. She just handed me the key card and said, "Room 7's quietest. Faces the empty lot." I dropped my bag, turned on the fan for noise, and sat on the edge of the bed. My phone blinked one new voicemail. Mira. "Hey Gideon, just in case. If you need the name of a buyer who doesn't need open houses or neighbors peeking, call me. I know a woman from my church group. Quiet, cash-ready." I smiled. Mira Winthrop had a way of making hard things sound like recipes. We'd met at the public library fundraiser 2 years ago. She ran the auction table, and I donated a box of old law books. By 7:30, I was at the Sunnyside Diner off Hillcrest Road. Vinyl booths. Waitress named Lenora, who still wore her name tag, like a badge of faith. I ordered eggs over medium wheat toast, black coffee. Mira came in wearing a denim jacket over her real estate blouse, carrying a slim laptop bag, and a smile that said, "I'm on your side." "No questions," she said as she slid into the booth. "Just coffee." She nodded. "I had a granola bar at 6. Let's talk logistics." We didn't need to talk much. She pulled out her tablet, showed me the listing contract. Off-market by referral only. I have 2 clients in mind, both local, but there's one in particular. Divorced, mid-50s, back from Denver, wants quiet, sees value in heritage homes. I nodded, running a finger along the edge of the table where the laminate peeled like old wallpaper. She hesitated. "Harold gave me your packet. You trust me with this?" "Yes," I said. She slid a small leather writing pad across the table. "Sign here." I reached into my coat and pulled out the pen. Emily's pen. The one she used to sign her name with a little loop at the Y, the same one she used to address Christmas cards in cursive. That looked stolen from the 1950s. I uncapped it, took a breath, signed. The nib scratched slightly. A lovely sound, honest, imperfect. Mira smiled. "It's done. Legally, Clarabelle doesn't exist in this picture. You're the sole owner." I nodded. That's all I needed to hear. She glanced out the window toward the rising sun, slicing through the clouds like a slow revelation. "You want me to handle everything?" "Yes, just updates by text. No paper trail at the house." She sipped her coffee. "Understood." As I folded my napkin into exact thirds and set it gently beside the now cold plate, she tapped the screen and looked up again. "I think we've got a serious one. I can get her in for a viewing tomorrow afternoon. She knows it won't be listed publicly. She prefers it that way." I looked at her. "What's she like?" "Quiet," Mira said. "Kind eyes. Grew up around here. Wants a home where she can hear herself think." I smiled. "She might like the tomatoes." Mira stood zipping her bag. "She probably will." Clarabelle opened the envelope barefoot on the porch, still in her gray fleece slippers. Her hair was clipped back with a plastic claw coffee steaming from a mug that read CEO of my life. She assumed it was something she ordered, maybe the water flosser or the new vegan collagen powder, but it wasn't. It was a formal notice of sale and transfer of deed for the property at 612 Maple Crest Drive. She blinked, reread it, scanned for fine print that would say, draft or pending, something to soften the truth already rising in her throat like poorly chewed food. From inside, Brent called, "Everything okay?" She didn't answer right away. The sunlight suddenly felt too bright, too sharp. The porch slats looked unwashed. The ceramic flower pot she'd bought last spring faded from coral to chalk. When she stepped inside, Brent stood by the hall closet, one duffel bag at his feet. His eyes slid toward the envelope in her hand. "What the hell is this?" she hissed. He didn't flinch. "Gideon's house. He sold it. He can't. We live here," Brent exhaled. "We stayed here. We squatted in kindness. The notice said she had 30 days to vacate, but she didn't read that part. She just stared at the closing line filed in witness June 3, 2022, as requested by owner Gideon J. Murphy. She dropped the envelope on the granite island like it might detonate. Her fingers trembled as she folded the letter back into thirds, poorly jagged. She looked up at Brent. You knew. He shrugged one shoulder. I suspected. Outside, a robin chirped like nothing had changed. She pressed the heel of her palm against her forehead. I gave him space. I let him stay here. Brent said nothing. Then maybe that was the problem. Across town, I sat in Harold's dusty office sipping black tea that had cooled too quickly. Mira was at the far end of the table double-checking signatures on the PDF. She nodded once briskly like someone finishing a crossword puzzle. It's done, she said. Diane's moving in next Friday. Harold swiveled in his leather chair and handed me a manila folder. Just so you know, per your request, I scanned the letter, attached it to the file. Even lawyers need a soul now and then. I smiled. Thank you. I didn't need to open it. I knew what it said. I'd memorized the slant of Emily's handwriting years ago. Back in the Maple Crest kitchen, Clarabelle had begun pacing. Her bare feet made soft thuds on the hardwood, her slippers now forgotten under a chair. She dialed my number straight to voicemail. She left a message, I don't know what you think you're doing, but you don't have the right. This affects all of us. I listened to it later that evening. Alone in my motel room, soft jazz spilling from the next unit. I heard her voice crack, not at the beginning, but at the end, when she thought she'd won by yelling. Then I deleted the voicemail. Mira's text arrived just after sunset. Done. House is no longer hers, or yours. It's free. I set the phone down on the bedside table beside a cup of half-drunk tea and Emily's pen, the pen I hadn't used since the signature. I lay back, hands folded over my stomach. The ceiling fan turned lazy arcs overhead. For the first time in a long time, I felt no walls closing in. Somewhere I imagined Diane, the new owner, walking through the hallways, her hands trailing along the banisters. Maybe she'd find the scratch marks I'd left moving in Emily's hope chest in '87. Maybe she'd keep them. Maybe that house could finally breathe again. Clarabelle stood at the curb, flanked by 2 Samsonite suitcases that looked more expensive than necessary. The morning was unusually still for Cedar Falls. No dog walkers, no joggers, just the hum of a delivery van a few blocks over. She tapped her phone against her palm, the screen still lit from the 4th unanswered call. Across the street, Mrs. Halver from the porch next door paused watering her begonias. Is that Clarabelle? She murmured to no one. Her husband poked his head out a second later. She got evicted by her own dad, he whispered. Clarabelle's eyes darted. She adjusted her sunglasses though the sun wasn't out. Her mascara was smudged not in a dramatic way, but in the quiet fatigue of a sleepless night. Her blouse was too crisp, too formal for the sidewalk. The keys in her hand jingled softly as she tried them again. The lock didn't respond. It wasn't just changed, it had forgotten her. I sat on the balcony of my new apartment, legs crossed, mug of mint tea cupped between both hands. From here, the skyline curled against the morning haze. I liked the quiet, how everything felt slightly removed, like I was behind the glass of a museum exhibit labeled Late Stage Clarity. The security system Mira installed had a clean interface, 4 cameras, all accessible by phone. I tapped into the porch view. Clarabelle's figure appeared grainy, but unmistakable. She tilted her head, speaking into the phone. A voicemail icon blinked on my screen. I didn't listen. Not now. Brent emerged from the side path with a single carry-on. No dramatics, no slam doors, just a slow gait and a tired face. Clarabelle turned to him. Where are you going? He looked her in the eyes longer than I expected. Away, he said. You crossed a line with him, and with me, she blinked. Brent, this is my family. He shook his head. You tried to own it. That's different. Clarabelle didn't chase him. She didn't cry. She just stood still as Brent walked off, wheeling his bag toward the cul-de-sac, the sound of the suitcase wheels faint against the pavement. She sat down on one of the Samsonites. Her posture collapsed in on itself, the confident lines of her spine slumping forward. Her phone buzzed again. She didn't answer. For once, she didn't have a plan. I closed the live stream. I didn't need to see more. Instead, I pulled the curtain across the glass door and leaned back into the old armchair I brought from the previous place, its arms worn smooth from years of elbows and coffee mugs. The mint tea had cooled just enough. I took a sip and let the warmth settle behind my ribs. Below, the city stirred. Horns honked. An espresso machine hissed somewhere. I didn't feel victorious, just done. Sometimes that's better than winning. I didn't answer the last call. It buzzed twice on the counter before slipping into silence. The screen went black. Instead of picking it up, I opened my laptop and began to type. There are days when peace arrives like the scent of something cooking in the apartment next door. Faint, steady, just enough to remind you the world is still turning. That morning, the sky was slate gray and generous with its clouds. Autumn had curled around the city, painting the riverbank with rust and copper. From the 24th floor, the wind sounded like a low question whispered through glass. I had slept well. Mira's email came in before 9 a.m. Subject update on Diane's place. She added a little herb garden in the back. Mint just like you said. She asked if you'd ever come visit. I smiled. Diane hadn't needed much, just quiet, clean walls and a place to start again. I knew the feeling. My desk now held 2 mugs, one with yesterday's ring of tea drying at the rim, the other a newer one, white with the navy blue logo of our group, Fathers Forgotten. I designed it late one night, a pair of hands palm up holding nothing. Sometimes nothing is the hardest thing to carry. I published the first post that morning. The title, The Quiet Guide to Holding the Line. I copied the letter, exactly the one Emily had written back in 2009, the curves of her script now digitized in perfect human. I added a brief note. This was written by a woman who knew what it meant to stay when it was easier to vanish. I'm just trying to do the same. By noon, there were 3 comments. By dinner time, 17. Most of them were short. Thank you, needed this. You put into words what I couldn't. One stood out. Anonymous username. I think I'm becoming my son. Or worse, the father I never forgave. I stared at it for a while. Let the cursor blink beneath his words. Then I typed, then stop him before he forgets you too. Start with yourself. I hit send and leaned back. Outside, the sky had softened to violet, the kind of light Emily used to call forgiving. I didn't know what she meant at the time, but I think I do now. The tin box sat on my bookshelf. I'd labeled it last week, simple Sharpie letters kept, not lost. Inside were a few things: Emily's letter, the deed, the photo we took at Table Rock Lake in 1986, where the wind messed up her hair just right. I placed the letter on top and closed the lid with care, not finality. There's something about old paper that feels more alive than new wood. I glanced at my phone. Still no new calls. I opened a blank document. Title, second post, The Cost of Silence. And I began to write. The mint has started to grow wild on my balcony, just enough to catch its scent when the windows open. I keep the tin box tucked away now, not because I've forgotten, but because I finally learned how to remember without hurting. Sometimes we don't win arguments. We just outlive the need for them. And sometimes what we protect isn't a house or a name, but a quiet place inside us. No one else gets to redesign. Have you ever had to draw a line, not in anger, but in love, share your story below, or stay a while and listen to others?